This segment is brought to you by Cardiovascular Institute of the South, providing our patients the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Martin Folse, and once again, as promised, we promised the clerk of court candidates they could come on Bayou Time and express themselves individually for a little longer than we had before. It was too short a time. So Jerome Zeringue is with me now. Jerome, good to see you.
Good to see you, Martin. Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's talk about, the race in general. A lot of people, of course, you're in a different sector. You've been in an elected position, so I'm sure a lot of people do recognize you. But just a little bit about your family, if you don't mind. We'll start with that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was fortunate enough after my graduate degree, I got at LSU. My first job here was with LSU Sea Grant, and met my wife, local girl, and been here ever since. So I've been working, doing public service in and around Terrebonne Parish for the past 30 years, and I've enjoyed doing it, and it's been a great opportunity, a great honor to represent the people of Terrebonne and to make sure we do some things to really improve, from flood protection to looking at a lot of things, not only here, but across the state, that we've been able to do to accomplish, to make some improvements through public service, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
And children,
I have a son. He is in his second year in optometry school at Memphis, and just recently got married and doing great. So we were proud of him, and we look forward to getting him back, hopefully come back and practice here.
So in all transparency, you would agree that you're married up?
Oh, I'll kick my coverage. Believe me, I did much better than.
All right, good. Okay, so we got that done. So you recently pledged that if you're elected, to not seek re-election in 2 years if you aren't able to make substantial changes in the office. That's a pretty bold pledge. Let me let you talk about it a little bit.
Well, I made the pledge because I firmly believe it, and I think I can do it. And the challenge, Martin, is the fact that the Terrebonne Parish Clerk's office is far behind our neighboring parishes. If you look at our other parishes, Lafourche, far and away, Annette Fontana has done an excellent job in incorporating advancements in technology. And I believe that I can and I will make improvements, significant improvements, to improve the case management system, a completely integrated system. And we can talk about some of the specifics and some of the challenges we have here in Terrebonne. But I've already got commitments from the software providers, similar system to what's in Lafourche, a completely integrated system that allows for electronic signatures with the judges, for all case management with the parish, both civil and criminal, and I can get that done, and it will not cost the taxpayers of Terrebonne Parish one penny. I can get it incorporated and implemented within the first 2 years. And again, my commitment is that I can't make significant improvements in 2 years. I will not seek re-election, but I know I can do it.
Can you be a little more specific? For a guy like me that's not real computer savvy, I still write things on a piece of paper. Well, what do you mean? Specifically, go into some of that if you could.
Sure, not to get too weedy. The challenge we have here in Terrebonne is ultimately, and the clerk system and within the judicial process, within e-filing, is going to go to a paperless system. Whenever you have manual input of data, it just allows for the opportunity for error. And I passed a bill 2 years ago to require e-filing for all clerks of court offices. Unfortunately, Terrebonne was one of the last parishes to implement that, but the intent is to upgrade the systems to allow for a consistent process throughout the judicial process. I started a task force 4 years ago with Chief Justice John Weimer, and we looked at judicial reform, and we looked at making improvements throughout the judicial process, and also looking at ways we can create efficiencies with the clerk's office and the judiciary. So I passed this bill to require e-filing, but it also looks at trying to get the programs that are needed, and that's what I was talking about, the programs that we could have implemented here in Terrebonne Parish. In fact, it was offered to Terrebonne Parish 4 years ago, but they hadn't availed themselves of it. But those are the things that we can do to have a completely integrated system that makes the system better for the public and better for the judiciary, and makes the processing of paperwork. We can do it in minutes or days as opposed to weeks, which it currently takes now.
Let's do this. I know I'm going to the break early. We're going to add the time in the second segment because I don't want to start a question with a little over a minute left. So we'll take a break. We're going to come back more with candidate Jerome Zeringue when we come back Don't go away. This segment was brought to you by Cardiovascular Institute of the South, providing our patients the highest quality cardiovascular care available. All right, welcome back. Martin Folse here. We're talking with Jerome Zeringue. He's one of the candidates for Clerk of Court. And of course, like I said before, when we had Miss Jody Burton on, nobody sees the questions. Nobody gets to see the other interview till it airs. So there's no comparing. We just want to be fair across the board. It also will air on Facebook and YouTube. So you can share it, send it, do whatever you have to do. All right, Jerome, we're back. Let me ask you a question. We talk about plans and implementation of plans and all that. And we hear that all the time in some elections, but the candidates don't explain the plan. Could you explain your plan to me?
So my plan is going to modernize the clerk's office by introducing technology that not only matches or surpasses the parishes that are around us that are much more advanced than we are here in Terrebonne Parish, but also strengthens our judicial system and improves the services for the citizens and eliminates waste and increase efficiencies. And you do that by putting the totally integrated system that I mentioned, the I3 system. Right now, Terrebonne Parish is using a COT system. It's an outdated system. In fact, other clerks that I've spoken with are transitioning out of COT because it's hard to get service work, and it's an older system. It was good for the time, but it's outdated. The system that I'm going to have, the I3 system, is more advanced. It's what LaFouche uses. And not only is it going to allow for that completely integrated system that I mentioned, it also eliminates the need for another level of input. Because right now, Terrebonne is using Clerk Connect for their e-filing. Clerk Connect is a competitor of the COT system that they're using. So it's not completely integrated. It's inoperable. So what they have to do is they may get a file that's an e-file paperwork or process. They can stamp it as e-file, but to put it in the Terrebonne Parish system, they have to download it and manually incorporate it into the COT system. The system I'm talking about, from the judges all the way through the process, is going to be completely integrated and electronic and eliminate or minimize the opportunity for human error. Not to mention, we passed a bill last legislative session. It's called a broker system that ultimately is going to go from the Supreme Court through the DAs to the clerks, all within one system to minimize and eliminate any problems or issues or dates, and because that affects people if they're going to court or if they're going to get out of court. The information that they provide is going to be important, that it's consistent all the way up through the chain. And typically it goes to the Supreme Court and has to go down through other processes, and every time it has to be reevaluated or input, it's just an opportunity for human error. So it's going to ultimately go to a paperless system, and the system that I will implement will be available to be utilized by the judges and all the other clerks, incorporated throughout the Supreme Court process.
You know, I think most people, they hear the more high-profile races, state rep, senator, governor, parish president, things of that nature. When you talk about clerk of court, I don't know if a lot of people really realize how important a position that is. You've got information, personal information of people at your fingertips. You can look at everything. Mm-hmm. Describe that, and why did you jump into this particular way? Did you have just did something hit you, or did you always sort of like that kind of job?
Well, no, it's interesting, and obviously the clerk's position in the parish is very important. You tell people I'm running for clerk of court, and one of the first things they ask you, well, what the heck does the clerk of court do? But the clerk of court is important. It's pretty much from the cradle to the grave, from a birth certificate to a death certificate and everything in between, and mortgages. So when you process paperwork, or you have to file paperwork either on your behalf or attorneys, the clerk's the official recorder for the parish. In addition, the clerk's office is the heartbeat of the judicial process within that parish, and working within the judicial system in the case process, both civil and criminal, and working with the judges, processing evidence and all the other aspects, the minutes and the jury. And another important aspect is we are going to get new voting machines, and I've worked very closely. In fact, I served with the current Secretary of State, Nancy Landry, in my first term. We both served together in the House. I have a great working relationship with her. Mm-hmm. There's going to be new voting machines. And that's going to be important because, the president has talked about, a paper ballots. They're considering everything from a paper ballot, but at a minimum, we should have a verifiable paper traced system that you can have on paper how your vote was recorded and ensure that your vote was recorded and how it was recorded. And it's an audible paper trail that we can implement. So the new systems will require or allow that. At a minimum, we need to do that. So the poll workers need to be trained on that. We have a closed primary system that's going to be important, that for all federal elections, it's going to be a closed primary, and all the poll workers and the public need to be educated about that. So there's a lot of important things that the clerk's office is responsible for. And the reason I got involved in it, as I mentioned, 5 years ago, Chief Justice Houma and I established this task force to look at the judicial process, which included judges, DAs, and clerks. And there were obviously opportunities that we need to take advantage of to improve the judicial process. And how we fund the judicial process is typically funded for fees and fines, which is kind of not the way you want to fund the judicial system, and that's a whole nother issue. But through that, I was able to pass legislation, the e-filing requirement for all clerk's offices, because to move to that paperless system, it's going to require that. And a lot of them still operating old school, and they were reluctant to do that. So I passed a bill to kind of force them to do it. But that gave me an opportunity, not only within working the judicial process, but working with clerks across the state. I've worked very closely with the Louisiana Clerks Association. So I've seen what good clerks offices can accomplish and how efficient and effective they can be, like Lafourche, which has a first rate, and Annette does a really good job. And over here in Terrebonne, I think we're still using outdated systems that need to be upgraded, and we're still operating. In fact, we're still using some processes. The sheriff actually employs 2 employees at $200,000 a year to stay in the clerk's office to ensure that they have the proper paperwork if people are going to jail, to when they're processing these folks, to make sure they get it right. Right now, it takes anywhere from 7 to 10 days to process paperwork before it gets to the sheriff's office. In most clerk's office, 2 to 3 days are too long. So the sheriff, unfortunately, taking 2 people that could be out on the street are actually in the clerk's office because they need to get that paperwork in a timely manner, and that's what the public and the people deserve. And that's where I think things that need to be improved, not just within the processing service, but also opportunities for people who utilize that office, that we can do things to make it more efficient and more effective.
All right, let's do this. We'll take a break. We're going to come back with our final segment with one of the candidates for clerk of court. That's Jerome Zeringue. We'll be back. Don't go away. This segment was brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Feels like home. All right, welcome back. We continue our questions with clerk of court candidate Jerome Zeringue. And once again, you can view all these programs with Ms. Burton and Mr. Zeringue on YouTube also and Facebook. So we'll do that. Jerome, I heard you, I don't know if it was this show or the last show where we talked about grants and state funding. And I guess that's important when you're running an office like the clerk of court's office. Do you plan on seeking state funding or grants? And if so, how would you do it?
And there is funding available on several fronts. And one of the most disappointing, unfortunate things, as I mentioned, the technology improvements were offered to the parish 4 years ago, and they hadn't taken advantage of it. But it's not a lack of money. The clerk's office has a $5 million surplus they're sitting on right now. Now, granted, some of that has to be reserved in case there's a storm or other things like that, but there's definitely enough funding. But apart from that, LCRA is the Louisiana Clerks Remote Access Authority, and they were formed in 2014 primarily to provide funding for clerks' offices. There are millions of dollars available. In Terrebonne, they applied for grants in 2017, 2018, and 2021, and just $74,000. Since then, over 5 years, they hadn't made applications or grants, and there are millions of dollars available to provide for the improvements that this clerk office needs. And again, I can do that, and I will get that done within 2 years, and it won't cost the taxpayers of Terrebonne 1 penny. So apart from that, there's also opportunities through capital outlay and other funding sources within state government that we need a generator here in the clerk's office in case the power goes out. We could have taken advantage of some of the past storm CDBG dollars, but that wasn't done. And I know it's a historic building and you have to be somewhat sensitive to that, but there's no reason why we don't have backup power that when the power's out for several days, the office can still operate. I think that's a critical need. And also, I think some of the things that the funding can provide, both state funding to address that, but also make those improvements. Apart from Lecrae, apart from the surplus, there are things that are available that we could take advantage of to improve the office.
All right, let's do this with about 4 minutes left, and I gave the same opportunity to Miss Jody. Anything on the campaign trail or any flyers, anything that was put out about Jerome Zeringue and what he would do to the office that you would want to set the record straight? I'll give you that opportunity right now.
Well, thank you, Martin, because there have been things that have been said, unfortunately, untruths. And some of the things in Facebook and others that you've seen. The first one is, well, you know, he's a career politician. Well, honestly, I just run for one office. I ran for office one time, ran against a great guy, won by 6 votes. So don't let anybody tell you your vote doesn't count. It's important. But won that race, and then the next 2 races I ran unopposed. So either somebody doesn't want the job or they thought I was doing a pretty good job that I ran unopposed. So I only ran for one office. The current clerk has actually been in elected office 3 years longer than I have. So I don't think anyone considers Ms. Teresa a career politician. She's been in elective office longer than I have. Even if you count the 2 years I was elected student council president in junior high, I still have less years elected office than Teresa. The other thing is that I'm just looking for a job. Well, that's not true because, well, first off, you don't get paid much as a legislator. You know, you get $16,000 a year. I love the job, never put more work in a part-time job in my life. But I have a consulting job that I do coastal work. A lot of my background is in coastal science and coastal projects. So I can continue to do coastal work and coastal consulting and be happy. So I'm not looking for a job. And I think one of the most egregious things that have been said, unfortunately, is, well, I'm just doing it to improve my retirement. Well, I can assure you, Martin, in this race, there's only one person that their retirement is going to benefit from getting elected, and it's not me. My retirement was fixed when I ran in 2015, and it was when I retired from the state, that's it. You know, I've heard that, well, you know, since he's a legislator, he's getting retirement. State legislators do not get retirement. That was stopped in 1997. So legislators don't get retirement. My retirement is fixed, and I can't add it or put it to another retirement system. In fact, if I got elected, I'd have to join the clerk's retirement system. I'd have to work 20 years to get a retirement from the clerk's retirement system. I'm not going to be there that long. Not to mention, just to get vested to where I would get back what the clerk's office puts in, which the state puts in to match me, I'd have to work 12 years. Again, my plan is to improve the office within 2 years, maybe serve another term to ensure that it's all working right, and then turn it over to someone else. I'm not looking for a long-term job. My opponent, who's been there for 44 years, is fixed in her retirement, and the only way, and she's part of that retirement system, she will get a substantial increase in her salary if elected. And as such, the only way she can increase her retirement is getting a higher salary. So with that higher salary, she's going to get a substantial increase in both her salary and her retirement by getting elected. So this rumor or this falsehood that I'm doing it to benefit my retirement, it's not true because my retirement would not be benefit.
Yeah. It's, you know, the more I talk to both you and Jody, I realize how big this job is. It really is a big job. And we have about a minute left. Does a learning curve scare you, or are you ready to jump into that kind of sector?
No, I'm ready to jump in, and I think I'm more than capable with my experience in what I've been able to accomplish in my previous work to get the job done. Again, I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking to complete a job and modernize the office of the Clerk of Court in Terrebonne Parish. I'm not looking to pad my paycheck or my retirement, and I think this is something that I can do. And as I pledged, I plan to do this within 2 years, and if I don't make significant improvements within those 2 years, I'm not going to run again. So my goal is to improve this office. I have the capability to do it, and the clerk is really an administrator. You know, we talk about 44 years of experience. I can tell you they're not doing every menial task within the clerk's office. I can bring the resources that are that are available and improve that office and modernize it and bring it into the 21st century.
All right, Jerome. Good seeing you again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Martin.
All right, we appreciate it. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more on HTV. Don't go away. This segment was brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your partner is good health.